Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this DAP learning series on analytics events. It looks like we've got some folks that are still trying to log on, so I'm just going to wait another minute or two before we get started. But for those of you already here, we appreciate you joining, and you can also ask any questions via the chat box. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Again, thanks to all who are joining us today for this Digital Analytics Program Learning Series, this particular edition on analytics events. My name's Tim Loudon. I'm the program manager for the Digital Analytics Program, or what we affectionately refer to as DAP. A few things to talk about before we start on this webinar today. The training will be recorded and put in our YouTube DigitalGov channel analytics playlist, which will be sent to you afterward. So you can make sure that you can review anything that you see here, so you don't have to be taking furious notes or anything like that. Additionally, in the package that you'll be sent afterward, and I think in the chat box towards the end of the actual presentation, there's also going to be a link for a satisfaction survey. If you could please fill that out. It is really, really helpful for helping us shape these trainings to make sure that they're the best they can be, and we always want to hear your feedback. Along with me today, we have my colleague, the inimitable Freddie Blicker, who is going to be heading up the chat room, which you can find, I think, just below the screen that you see the first slide here. And he'll be answering any questions that you have in the chat room, as well as passing some questions to me during the Q&A session. Okay, I think with that, we can go ahead and get started. So today, talking about analytics events. So firstly, starting from the very basics, what exactly is an event in Google Analytics? An event is any interaction that happens after a page load. So for those of you that have been working in Google Analytics frequently, or you have some experience, you'll know that there are a lot of different things that Google tracks that are basically based on page load. Page view, um, average session time, or time on page, things like that. There are various different interactions that are recorded every time a page loads. But after a page loads, there aren't so many interactions that are recorded, or actually there are no interactions that are recorded in default Google Analytics. So what I'm referring to when I say an interaction after page load is something like a click on a link, or a button, or a scroll of a page, various different things that you could actually track, but that aren't tracked based on a page load. So that's what an event is at its purest form. So where do we have the events tracking in Google Analytics? You can find the events under the Behavior tab on the left-hand navigation, under the Events tab, which you'll see here. And then we'll be showing you this a little later in the presentation, but I usually use the top events report to base my event reporting. So there is sort of a hierarchy, or an anatomy, if you will, of how events work in Google Analytics. And I've tried to make some some sort of drawings here to help display that. But basically, there are 3 levels of event. There's event category, event action, and event label. And with the sort of upside down pyramid that you see here on the left-hand side, or I guess upside down pyramid we could refer to as a funnel, you can see that the event category is the most broad term. And then as you move down into the other categories, you increase the granularity. So category being the broadest, we might have a category for events that's just called click. And the click could be on various different things. But that particular category records all the clicks. And then in action, you might have a few different actions like link click or button click or menu click, things like those, like that. So you're just further defining your category. And then as you get completely down to label, that's where you want your descriptor to be most granular. So if you had, say, a category of click, an action of button click, and then a label, the label might be purchase button or application submission or contact us or something like that. So you can see that the sort of granularity gets further and further as we go down the funnel of category, action, and label. And on the right here, we've got a little sort of display of how you might have one category with 3 different actions. And in those actions, you might have multiple labels for each one. I know that's a little sort of abstract the first time you hear it, but I think it'll make more sense once I'm able to show you a little bit. So, good news and bad news. The bad news is events are not configured by default in Google Analytics accounts. And that might make you feel like this sad little puppy. But the good news is, if you're a DAP user, we record a few events for you by default. And that should make you a much more happy puppy. And we all want to be happy puppies, I think. So what are the different events that DAP records for you? I think we have 5 or 6 total. We're going to talk about them right now. The first thing that we automatically track when you implement DAP without any further customization from you is outbound. The category is called outbound, the event category. And that refers to a link click on your site that leads outside of your specific hostname. So I put an example here. If you are nih.gov, that's the site that you're trying to do analysis on, and you say post a job posting, or actually that would be USA Jobs that it would be. So let's just say some sort of personnel guidance that comes from opm.gov. If on your nih.gov page you have a link to some page on opm.gov and someone clicks on that, it will fire an event hit to the category that's called outbound. So as long as it leaves your specific hostname, and when I say specific hostname, I mean also subdomains. So currently, in the default DAP setup, you could have a link on nih.gov that goes to, say, publications.nih.gov. And that would still record as an outbound link click. So it's anything that is not your specific hostname, whether that be a second-level domain or a subdomain. If you're leading with someone outside of that with a link, it will fire a hit into outbound. Okay, the next one, download. This is maybe the event that most people are looking to try to track when they email us looking for reporting help. So a download is a link click on your site to a file that you host. And the key here is it must end in the file extension for DAP to recognize it as a file. So an example might be this particular file, which has been very popular lately, as you might guess. On irs.gov, it leads to the 1040 PDF. So if you go on irs.gov and you're on the page where you can download that particular link, and you click on this link, which is probably just says download the 1040 form or something like that, it leads to this particular place, and it ends in .pdf. When it ends in .pdf or .xls or .doc or various different other extensions for a file, that has a special sort of trigger in our DAP JavaScript code that says, oh, we need to file this click as a download. Some people have asked me before, does the file actually need to be downloaded for that, that event to fire? And the answer is no. We call it download, but in most modern browsers, like if you're using Chrome and I click on this, it won't download into my hard drive. Instead, it will just open in a new tab, still recorded in what we call the download category. So anytime somebody clicks on a link that has one of the recognized extensions on it, it'll go there. Okay, so now we talked about outbound, and we talked about download. Now we have outbound download, which is the same thing as a download click, except it's a file hosted in another domain. So if you have, if I'm on USA.gov and I post a link to the 1040 file that I have here, my domain is USA.gov, but I'm putting a link on that's hosted by IRS.gov. Therefore, it's an outbound download. So I hope everyone understands the distinction between the two here. A download happens when it matches your host name and it's a file. An outbound download happens when the link does not match your host name and it's a file. Okay. We also track mail to links, which is a link click that basically is to an email address. You see this often used for contact pages. We also track outbound mail to, so very similar to the download and outbound download difference. If I am on USA.gov and I click a link that goes to timothy.loudon@usa.gov, that would be classified as an event under the mail to category. If I was on USA.gov and I clicked on a link that had an email address that was timothy.loudon@gsa.gov, which is what it would be in this actual case, then it would be classified in outbound mail to. So you can see the outbound sort of just denotes when you're no longer in the domain that the visitor is on. And finally, we track telephone clicks, which is a click on your site from a smartphone on a phone number, which initiates a call. Now, this one's kind of interesting because obviously the browsers on a desktop don't usually have a function where if you happen to click on a set of 7 or 10 numbers, that it would actually initiate a phone call. But if someone's on a mobile device, most of the current mobile devices and the browsers on mobile devices will recognize a number pattern as a phone number, and they'll give you the option to click on it with, a click being a finger press, where it would initiate a call. So we also track that for you. So you can find out how many folks are clicking on those phone numbers with their phones to initiate a call right from your webpage. Those are the standard events that come out of the box with DAP. Now, to reiterate, as I said on this last slide up here, if you have independent Google Analytics accounts, which we recommend everyone does, even if you're using DAP, when you start tracking with that independent Google Analytics account, there will be no events configured for you. There will be nothing in the events reporting section. So these events are recorded for you because we have hard-coded them into the DAP script. So when you implement the DAP script, you automatically get some of these events. But if you set up a new independent Google Analytics account, you should not expect them to be reporting because they won't. Okay, those are, I guess, with outbound mail to, there's a total of 6. But we also have a special one that you can add as an option. You can add YT equals true, which stands for YouTube equals true, into your DAP script tag to also create an event to record YouTube video plays. Now, some people are going to ask, well, why isn't this on by default? And actually, we had a DAP version where we did have the YouTube tracking on by default, but it wasn't actually what we intended. The reason why it's an option for you to turn it on is because not all sites have YouTube videos that are embedded into their pages. And when you turn this option on, upon a page load, there's a ping to the YouTube API. So it's really only something you want to do if you have YouTube videos. But if you host YouTube videos, you can add in your DAP script tag, that little parameter, and folks probably want to know what I mean by that. So let me see if I can show you here. If I go to gsa.gov, oh, they might implement with a tag manager now. Let's take a look. Okay. So right here, you can see that this is our DAP script tag. All I did was look in the page source of gsa.gov, and here's where you call our code. They call from dap.digitalgov.gov, which is our central host location. And you can see afterward, there's this question mark with the query parameters, agency equals GSA. There's a couple other things, and then you see YT equals false. In actuality, this isn't needed because YouTube equals false is already encoded by default into our code. But if you were to switch this parameter from YT equals false to YT equals true, it would then start recording hits for embedded YouTube videos. So let's talk about how these play out in the hierarchy. So if the category is outbound, that's literally the name you will see in the report. And you'll see this in just a few minutes when I go to the interface and show you. The action in this case is dynamic. It's the outbound hostname. So if you have an outbound link, and I think the example I gave was you're on USA.gov and you have the example was NIH. So you're on NIH.gov and you have a link to OPM. The action would be the outbound hostname, meaning opm.gov. The label would be the full link target. So that might be opm.gov/information/ I don't know, contact or whatever it may be. But it would be the full URL. This way, you can separate these into your different categories to say, well, on our site, we have a lot of links that go to opm.gov, and then you can separate them into each individual link that is posted. When you're looking at the category of download, the action is the file extension. So that's how you can click PDF or doc or XLS or JPEG, whatever it may be. And the label, again, is the full link target. So that's where, in my previous slides here, you would get this full irs.gov/pub/irs/pdf f1040.pdf. That's where you get that whole listing. When we're talking about outbound download, it's the same thing. It's just that now the file hostname is going to be outside of the hostname that the user is currently in. Mail to, there's actually no label, and the action is just the full email address. So I gave the example again. If someone's on USA.gov and they click on an email link that says email timothy.loudon@usa.gov, that's what it would give you, the email address of where people are actually clicking. And the same thing goes with outbound mail to, just like it did here. You would just get the email address of someone, of whichever link the person clicked on to email someone. Telephone click also doesn't have a label, and the action is just the phone number that somebody clicked on. And finally, the optional YouTube video. This is actually pretty cool. The action is either play or pause or the % viewed. So our default YouTube tracker will actually tell you if someone got a third of the way through, 2/3 of the way through, or all the way through the video in a percentage. So these actions trigger as the person is watching. When they hit play, you have an action, and then as you continue on, you get percentages based on how far they viewed the video. And the label is the full link of the video that's embedded on your page. Okay, now I've gone through most of the slides and gave you a little bit of a basis. So let's actually go to the interface and see how these things are used. So I'm in DAP right now, and I'm looking at the last 30 days, as you can see. I'm in the SBA agency profile, the Small Business Administration. And in my left-hand bar, as you can see here, this is what it would look like when you logged in. Under Behavior, Events, and you have to undo that accordion, and then I'm in Top Events. So you can see here, here's our various different DAP default event categories. And we can, because this is an Explorer report, meaning we can drill down, when I click into any one of these categories, it's actually going to drill down from category to action. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's look at outbound. So on SBA websites, the number one host name that folks click on to leave the site, but it's from a link on a page on one of the SBA websites, is to go to Census. And then you can see there are some other ones here: IRS, score.org, Google Maps, things like that. So somewhere on SBA pages, there are links to these specific host names. Then I can drill down further to get the entire link, the list of links that are from a specific host name. So if I click into census.gov, it then gives me the rest of the URL. So we can see that the vast majority of link clicks that are going from an SBA page through to a page that exists on Census is to the census.gov/EOS NAICS. I did happen to look this up when I was preparing, and this gives the standards for how much money and or employees you can have to be classified as a small business. So it totally makes sense that folks would be clicking from SBA.gov to a link that helps them understand whether or not their business is a small business. Okay, let's go back here. We can look at download. So now if I click on download, you can see it gives me the list of all the different file extensions. And PDF is usually the one that we see the most. If I click on PDF, it gives me the full link to the specific PDFs that were clicked on from SBA.gov sites. So the number one here is the size and standards table. We can take a look at that if we want. Table of small business size standards. Oh, it's the same thing. So we've got a lot of just figuring out if you're a small business. So this is, makes sense, right? That folks would be clicking on these if they're on an SBA site. Cool. So one of the things that I think everyone's probably asking right now is, great, we know which files were downloaded, but we don't know which pages they were downloaded from. And this is pretty common, right? You might have this particular file on many different pages. And for example, I know like recently, everyone's downloading all these tax forms. The IRS has various different places you can download the 1040 tax form. So what we can do here is add a secondary dimension. And if we add a secondary dimension for page, by doing this, we can then see the page where this file was downloaded from. So in this case, it looks like the top page has 11,000 events from this particular page. And let's see if we can find any that are the same here. I don't see any that are specifically the same here, meaning that on the SBA sites, mostly they have one page that offers each specific form or PDF. But in case you had more, if, for example, this particular PDF was offered on various different pages, you'd be able to see which pages people were actually clicking on the most in order to download it. And here's an example where you have the same page. So women-owned small businesses is a page that offers multiple different files. This one's just slightly different. EDWOSB NICS codes, NAICS codes. And this one is just slightly different. So these are two different files, but they're both offered from the same page. All right, let's go back and just take a look at some of these other things quickly. Mail to, as I noted, when you click on it, it'll just give you the specific email address that was clicked on. So the most popular one in this case is answerdesk@sba.gov. And again, if you want to know where that was being clicked on from, add a secondary dimension for page, and you can see. So there's a lot of, looks like the most popular page for these types of mail to links is on the what we do /contact SBA page. Same thing with the telephone clicks. I'll click there and then we'll show you outbound downloads. Just gives you the number that the folks were clicking on from the page. And outbound downloads, as I noted before, it's going to be the same as downloads, but now when I click on it, these links are not going to be to SBA. Well, they won't be directly from the same site. So there may be, in SBA's case, I think there are only maybe 6 or 7 different host names that funnel into this profile. But you can see that most of these are outside of the SBA realm. Now, you may, in here, because like if you work for an agency that has lots of different domains, like if you work for one of the really large ones, DHS or HHS or something like that, you may see event labels that are DHS owned sites, but it just means that someone was not clicking from DHS.gov to a download hosted by DHS.gov. It might be that it was hosted by, another DHS entity. And I'm going to show you how to do a custom report in a minute where we can just get them from a specific site. So that's where your events are. I typically, if I need to do something quickly, like find out how many times a specific PDF was downloaded, you can go to download PDF. You can search for it. I don't know the specific things that are on SBA here, but if I search for files that contain the word business, we can type the word business in, and it will give us all the different files that have business, and you can find a specific file, and you can also add the secondary dimension for page to find out which page that link was being clicked on. Okay, so that's the default reporting section for events, but more importantly, I want to show you how you can use the custom reporting section. Let me see how we're doing on time. 2:30. Okay, that's good. So in the custom reporting section, under customization, custom reports, let's say I wanted to do what we just saw, but I wanted to limit it only to a specific website. So as I was noting before, I'll go back to this in just a moment. If I go to content drill down under behavior, we can see there's quite a few different websites there's 29 different websites that are being tracked in the SBA profile. Most of them are subdomains of SBA.gov. So if I go to, when I was showing you the default reporting for the event section, that was including events for all of these different sites. So it would be very important that I put that secondary dimension for page on the report so I could know which exact site people were clicking on. But let's say I just want to have a report that I can go to where I know it's only giving me events from SBA.gov and not any of these subdomains. So under customization, custom reports, I'll start a new report, and we can do SBA.gov events. And there, I can use a metric of total events, and I can recreate what we saw in the events reporting by saying event category is my first dimension, then event action, and finally event label. And now this is the bread and butter of the custom reports. I can add a filter for host name exactly matches SBA.gov. Now, I'm recreating the exact same report that we just saw, except I'm now filtering it and limiting it to SBA.gov only and no subdomains of SBA.gov. So let's see here. Okay, now we've got all of these same categories that we just had, but now it's very specific to SBA.gov. So for example, if I click in outbound and I add a page dimension, it should only represent SBA.gov. Yeah. So you can see here now, we're not including any of the other websites that are contained within the broader SBA agency profile. So this is a great way for you to just have a running report You can adjust the date ranges. If you wanted to, you could actually, specify, like if you only cared about seeing, let's say, PDF downloads. If you only wanted to see PDF downloads on SBA.gov, you could actually have it only show you label, and you could add more filters in that specify you only want to see those. So uh, if I say the event action matches PDF, now we are specifically saying that the event action has to be PDF, which only exists within the download and outbound download categories. So what this in essence is saying is, show me the event labels for any download or outbound download that ends in PDF on SBA.gov. It's getting a little more advanced. So now we can see you can see these are normal downloads. These are outbound downloads, but I group them together just by specifying the action matching PDF. So that's another way you can edit your report to show you something specific. And finally, what if, let's say, not even SBA.gov, let's say I am just caring about the events that are happening on a specific page. So I could put in my event category action label again. And let's say we want to use that page for women-owned businesses. So I'm going to copy up to here. So note that in DAP, we don't include any of the protocol, HTTP or HTTPS, or the www. We have filters that specifically strip out the www. So I just need SBA.gov and everything after that. And I'm going to go in here and change my filter from hostname to page. And page refers to a single URL. And I'm then going to put in my women-owned businesses page and hit save. And we can see here, for that specific page, there's only two different events that happen. There aren't mail to clicks or telephone clicks. There's only download and outbound links. But now I can go to download, and I've narrowed this report down to a very specific page. There are only PDFs on this particular page that I can download. And if I open it up, you can see, okay, there are two specific PDFs on this page that someone can click on. So we went from looking at the default events report, which includes all the information from all the sites in a specific agency profile, to creating a filter to specify a single website, and then even making that filter even more granular by switching from host name to page and putting a specific page on that you could then track. And I know that we get requests all the time from folks that really only care about seeing something on a specific page or care about like one specific PDF. There are tons of people that are like, I just need to know how many times this one form was downloaded. And so this is a good way for you to narrow it down. Or you could use the search tool, the search bar in the default reporting categories. Okay, let me go back to my slides here. And I do want to talk about the difference between two different metrics, unique events and total events. So let me just show you back in the reporting section here. If I go to events, you will see that the default reports include total events, unique events, event value, and average value. So I want to talk a little bit about these. Event value is something that you can set with a specific event. When you create an event, you can associate it with a value. By rule of thumb, none of our default events have event values on them because they're being used across government for the Digital Analytics Program account. If you have an independent account and you're setting up your own events and you want them to have a specific value for some reason, you can do that. Obviously, average value is going to be nothing across an entire category if none of the specific events have value. So the only two things we really need to differentiate here are total events versus unique events. Basically, what that is a total event total events are events that are triggered anytime an event fires. So whether that be, your PDF click or your mail to click or your outbound link click, whatever that might be, it's all going to be counted in total events. Unique events, by contrast, and I had to go to Google to get this definition. Unique events are tracked when different event actions are triggered in a single session. So basically what that means is if I'm a single user and I'm on a website and I download two PDFs, they're both going to be classified in the PDF or in the event action called PDF. And so it's only going to be one unique event, whereas it will be two total events because I downloaded two PDFs. Another example might be if a user clicks play on a YouTube video 5 times, that's going to be one unique event and 5 total events. So all this goes to say, I mean, basically, if you want my opinion, I don't ever pay attention to unique events. I think that total events more like give me more of the data I'm looking for. I want to know every time an event is triggered. You may have use for a unique event at some point, but I would say as a rule of thumb, when we're doing events reporting, and especially in like a custom report that I created, I'm not using unique events. I'm always using total events. And that's just me. If you understand the difference and you feel a need to use unique events, go ahead and do that. Okay, before I move on, it's almost 2:40. I don't have too much more time. I do want to ask Freddie here if there are questions about anything that I've just shown you in the interface. Freddie, have there been some good questions?
There have been no questions yet, so folks feel free to put any questions into the chat box and we'll address those.
Okay, great. Well, we can answer questions at the end then, but I will keep on trucking. So now, here's where we get to an interesting part. I've told you that DAP has created, we've encoded by default a bunch of events that we feel are very important to your analysis. I personally think the downloading reports and the outbound link reports are very helpful in understanding, what your users are doing or if you're able to track those things. You can also configure events yourself. So if you were to have an independent Google Analytics account and you just started it up and you don't have any events that are, that are coded when you just put the new code on that site, you can configure your own. And there are 2 ways that you can really do that. One is adding language into the HTML itself, and one is using a tag manager. So I have this little picture here. You can see an example of one of these might be if you want to know how many times people click the Learn More button on your site, you can encode an event to fire anytime someone clicks that particular button. So this gets a little more advanced. You may need, especially for option 1, you will probably need to work with your developers in order to put these events in. I don't know how many of you have access to edit the HTML of your actual web pages. If you happen to use a tag manager like Telium or Google Tag Manager, it's a little bit easier, but I'm going to do a very quick run through of them both just so you get an idea of how it works. So the first way is, I've got this button here that I showed you, and I went in the page source. So I just hit right click, view page source, and I searched for Learn More, and I found that this particular button is a span that has a specific class that I guess denotes it as the button because the class is defined that way. So there's a really helpful tool that I put the link into, and everyone's going to receive a copy of these slides. But this tool is similar to if you've used the campaign URL builder that we've talked about in previous trainings. This is a tool for building events. And what you can do is actually give your category, action, and label that you want it to read as. And then it will spit out with you the code that you would need to fire an event. So if I have, let's say click, and the action I'm going to call button, and the label would be Learn More. then gives me this little guy, the on-click GA send event, and it tells what it to send it with. Click, oops, not button, an event label, learn more. So you would insert this into your specific, in this case, it gives you an href, which is just a link, but you might have a button. You can insert it into any various, what's the word I'm looking for? Item. That's not the right word. I'm not a JavaScript pro or an HTML pro, but you can insert it into the item as if it were a button or a link, and then it will send that event. So you would literally need to put that in something like this. So there would be the span, and you would say on click, yada, yada, yada. That's how you would do it in your HTML. And you would need to do that for every event that you wanted to record. Now, obviously, this specific page, oops, that's not the one I was on. Here it is. This, obviously, you are setting these things yourself. So they're not dynamic. They are specific. If you wanted, for example, the event label to automatically populate with the content, the string of the actual item, you would need to do some more advanced JavaScript work to be able to have a variable that would then get the link text and put it in there. So what I showed you here, the builder, is the really simple way where if you know that you want to label something a very specific way, you can set it there. But to make it dynamic requires more work. Okay, finally, the other way that you can create your own custom events is by using tag managers. So here's an example of what it looks like in Google Tag Manager. And I put a link here where there are various different recipes for events that you can peruse and import into Google Tag Manager. So for those of you that don't know what Google Tag Manager is, it's a way for you to manage your JavaScript tags, your script tags in your site without actually editing HTML. We have a whole separate webinar on Google Tag Manager and tag managers in general. You can find it in our analytics playlist, and it'll help you understand a little bit more what it is. But just to give you a quick rundown of what it looks like to set up an event in Google Tag Manager, I'm going to try to create one for you. Oh, I should tell you what this is here. So I've got a Google Tag Manager implementation on analytics.usa.gov, which is our public dashboard for analytics data. It's the only site that the DAP team actually administers. So this is like where I can play with things like Tag Manager. So what I wanted to do was create an event that would fire when someone clicked on these toggles. So it starts out on top pages right now. And you can click on the top sites over the last 7 days and the last 30 days. And I wanted to be able to have events fire when people click on those. So what I did was, and you can see I've already created them, but I'm going to show you how to do it. So test, independent event, 7-day click. So I click in tag configuration, and for those of you that haven't ever seen Google Tag Manager before, this might be very new to you, but just roll with me here. I'm going to try to explain what I'm doing as I go through. I would click Universal Analytics, and then the track type would be event. And then I could do exactly what I said before. So my category might be behavior. My action might be toggle, because it's the toggle between the now, 7 and 30 days. And my label might be 7-day. But now I'm saying, okay, any of the actions are falling in within the toggle, the 7-day or the 30-day click, and the label is going to be specifically for the 7-day. And then I have to set a settings variable, which is where I choose which analytics account I want it to be in, and you have to set this up prior with your UAID. And okay, so I've set this up. I want an event to fire, and now I have to tell it when it triggers. So I already have one set up, but I'm going to create a new one for you. We're going to call this trigger test 7-day. And you would have to set this up. And I could say, okay, I want this to be a link click because it is actually a link. And let me show you that. If you can see in the bottom left-hand side of my screen, when I hover over 7 days or 30 days or now, it actually changes down in the bottom left-hand side where it's using anchor tags. So it's analytics.usa.gov/ hash mark or pound symbol top dash pages dash 7 days. So it theoretically performs like it's its own link, even though it doesn't change the actual loading of the page. And I can use that to my advantage. So back in Tag Manager here, I can say links, and I want it to be some link clicks, not all links. And the click URL contains, and I'm going to go back and look at that again, it contains pound top dash pages dash 7 dash days. Pound top dash pages dash 7 dash days. That's correct. I probably should have copied and pasted that from somewhere. Top pages 7 days. Top pages 7 days. Okay, so let's try that. I now have a trigger for clicking on the 7-day link, and it's going to fire and say behavior toggle 7-day, and it's going to fire it to an independent Google Analytics account, not DAP. I have it set up to fire into a separate UAID for a separate account that we have running. Now, if I click save, and I set this up the exact same way as this one that I set up before, so I'm going to just pause this one because this is the one I just created. I don't want it to fire twice. Oops. So you all should just ignore that I just paused that because I just recreated something I already created. And then the great thing about GTM is you have this ability to hit preview. And now I can go to analytics.usa.gov and hit refresh. And it's going to tell me all of the things that Google Tag Manager is doing on this page. So right now it fired the DAP version 4.0, which is our newest version of the code that's coming out in just a couple weeks. You all are currently still on 3.1, but I tested it here. And you can see which ones have not fired. Now watch what happens when I hit this 7-day tag. Now it fired an event for 7-day click. And if I hit the 30, I created a separate one before, the same way I just showed you, but I used the other link for the 30-day click. So now it's run the DAP script and it's fired 2 events into the account that I set. So for those of you that have never used tag managers before, you can see it creates an ability for people to do things once you go through the tag manager learning curve where you don't have to be a developer to be able to do things where traditionally developers would have to be involved. I can push this to my live production environment without having to touch the HTML because it's all contained within the container that the tag manager operates out of. And so, again, for those of you that are like, what is this sorcery? I recommend checking out our tag manager webinar in our analytics playlist. So just to show you what that looks like here, I've actually gone to our separate Google Analytics account. Again, this is not DAP. It's a separate account that we have. And I implemented this just a couple days ago when I was preparing this particular webinar. And if I click on behavior, that's what I said that I wanted it to be. And you can see there's only events that are happening for the last 2 days because that's when I actually enabled these particular events to happen in GTM. And again, it came in as toggle, just like I set. And you can see which people or how many times people clicked on 30 or 7-day. And interestingly, I haven't tried this yet, but if I click page, it should tell me whether or not, some people did it on the homepage, some people did it from the pages that were specific to agency dashboards. So see like Veterans Affairs here, that means that someone was on the Veterans Affairs page. If I can find it, where is it? Department of Veterans Affairs, there it is. And so it also fires if I'm here. There's the 7, there's the 30-day. And so we've got folks that are on the individual parts of our site that are clicking on that 7 and 30-day toggle. And so that, I might have made it look easier than it really will be the first time you do it, but setting things up on GTM, once you understand a little bit about how tag managers work, is really, really great. So that's how you would set up your own. Now, this does come with a caveat. DAP, we pay for our Google Analytics 360 account on a program of what's called hit tiers. And a hit, in the sense of Google Analytics and the way we pay for it, is classified as either a page view or an event. And an event in the sense of total events. Anytime an event is fired, it counts as a hit. So obviously, we can't really control how many people view the sites. Page views is something out of our control. But we do have some level of control over events. And so basically, my plea here is I just showed you how to create your own custom events, although maybe not as eloquently as I could have. Please do not pass custom events to the DAP account unless you've spoken with us. If you come to us and you say, hey, I really want to track a specific button, it gets about 50 clicks a month, and I want to pass that into the DAP account, we shouldn't have a problem with it. If you come to me and say, I want to make an event passed into DAP on every single click that happens on our website, and we get 50 million hits a month, that will end up costing us a bunch of money, which we will not be cool with. And you'll either, basically, we'll have to set a filter that filters out that particular event. So if you have your own independent Google Analytics account and you want to set up events on your own, go wild. Like, get crazy. Record all the things you want. But if for some reason you're trying to pass an event that's not a DAP default event into our account, reach out to us beforehand and talk to us about it, and hopefully things will be fine. If we find that for some reason you're passing 5 million hits a month into our account from custom events that we didn't set up on our side, we may have to reach out to you and potentially filter those out. So apologies. So different kinds of events you can think about. Button clicks, form submissions, scroll depth. That's a really cool one. If you have a blog site and you want to know if people are actually getting to the bottom of the page and reading the bottom of the page, you can set up events for scroll depth, which is pretty interesting. So you can see if people hit the 50% mark or the 100% mark. Again, great to pass into your independent Google Analytics accounts. Email submissions, like form completions, blog comments, applications, things like that. There's all kinds of interesting events that you can set up. I do not want to encourage you to set up events for the sake of creating events. I have spoken to various different web owners that have their own analytics accounts that basically record anything that happens on the site. I don't feel that's particularly helpful. You'll definitely hear Freddie and I talk often about how you should be tracking and analyzing things that relate to completion of your goals and KPIs and your site's mission. So if it's very important for you to understand how many people are signing up for your newsletter, because that's the way you disseminate information, by all means, create an event that helps you understand how many people are signing up for your newsletter. If you just want to track everything for the sake of tracking it, you're going to drown in data for clicks and form submissions and all these different things. So have your strategy set up, understand what your KPIs are, record things that relate to your KPIs rather than erring on the side of mass collection. I don't think that really is going to help you or your resources for that matter, because you'll use up all of the events that you can use in your free account, which only allows you 10 million per month. Okay, 255, pretty good. So that is the end of the presentation. At this point, we can try to take questions. And again, you can always reach out to us at dap@support.digitalgov.gov if you don't want to ask something right here, or if you need help or just want to talk more about events. So Freddie, do we have any questions that came through?
Yes, we do. We have two questions. So the first is some feedback. So the tag manager training is challenging. Is there any training specifically on this? So Tim, you had mentioned the webinar that is on our YouTube channel. So that's one option that folks can go check out.
Yeah. So our webinar definitely gives you an understanding of what Tag Manager can do, but understanding using Google Tag Manager is there's definitely a learning curve there. We've spent the last 4 years doing trainings on Google Analytics to try to help you all use Google Analytics, and we could probably do as many trainings on Tag Manager. It is a beast of its own, but there's a lot of information online about how to use it. There's a lot of other YouTube videos, and our information can give you a start. But at this time, we don't have anything else that was produced by us that goes really, really deep. There's lots of different levels into tag managers. So I recommend definitely looking at as many outside resources as you can, and just sort of, if you have a test environment where you can put a tag manager on there and be able to play with it, you'll really start to learn a lot really quickly. But that's the best I've got for that. Tag manager is definitely difficult.
Oh, I totally agree. And one other resource you might want to take a look at is Google has an Analytics Academy where they have free courses, and one of those is Google Tag Manager Fundamentals. So that'll also be a good place to kind of dive deeper into that topic. Okay, so the second question is, if someone accesses a PDF on your site, but not by clicking a link on one of your site's pages, I'm assuming, to get to that PDF, is that counted as a download event?
Great question.
Yeah, great question.
So the answer is no. No. If you post a link directly to a PDF in your, let's say you post a link directly to a PDF in a Facebook post, there is no way for Google Analytics to know that that PDF was out there. Google Analytics code exists on your website. So it only has the ability to see things within the parameters of people on your website. So if you send out links to a PDF directly, like in an email or a social media post, that's being served from your server, whichever server hosts that particular PDF or doc or whatever it may be. There is no HTML behind that, and therefore there's no way to have Google Analytics code on that. It's just a file. It's like a PDF is basically a sheet of paper with nothing behind it. A website is a TV screen with lots of mechanics behind it, as a type of analogy. So a link click is a completely different ball game when it's on your website. When it's on your website, Google Analytics can see it's a link, it can see it has PDF at the end, and it can record it. But outside of your website where you have Google Analytics script tag on, it can't see anything beyond that. So great question. You cannot, if you send out a PDF in an email and 50,000 people click on that PDF, Google Analytics isn't going to tell you anything about it. It's going to just say 0 unless they clicked on it on your website. The best way to sort of search for that would be to go in your server logs. If you have the ability to get into your server logs, you can see how many times that file was served. But Google Analytics is only good for the website. Is that it, Freddie?
That is it.
Awesome. 2:59. I think we made great time. Well, again, I just want to close up by saying thanks, everyone, for attending today. I hope this was really, really helpful in your understanding for events. You can always email us and ask further questions. And I ask you, please fill out the survey that's going to be sent to you afterward. We very much appreciate your feedback and would welcome your opinions. So with that, I hope everyone has a great rest of the week. And we'll see you next month for our next DAP webinar.